It's been a little while since I did a tier ranking list on this channel, and now that Turning Red has come out, I thought it'd be a great time to do a Pixar tier list. I've done every single Disney animated feature film. I've also done every single Marvel property, at least up to, I believe, Hawkeye, if I'm not mistaken. Now I'm going to do every single Pixar film, at least up to Turning Red. And even though this one has Lightyear, I'm just going to ignore that. But I hope you enjoy this one. Leave your answers, leave your thoughts down below. I recorded this earlier today. I got a haircut since then, so I'm sorry. And let's jump over to the computer and see what I did earlier today. My name's Josh Taylor. This is Modern Mouse, and welcome to the Every Pixar Film tier ranking list. I'm gonna have a hard time with this one. This one is gonna have a bit of bias on my part because I'm such a huge Pixar fan. Specifically on some of these films, I'm like a major fan. But I will rank these chronologically. I've already set them up in order to be able to do that. And I want to try and do this with a bit of historical value and a bit of significance behind them as well. So hopefully you'll agree with me. Maybe you won't. If not, leave some comments. Let me know what you think, how you would rank these, or where I went wrong, or what I did right. But let's try this. First and foremost, Toy Story goes in the S tier. You cannot have Pixar without Toy Story, but you can't have the computer-generated boom in animation without Toy Story. And I know a lot of people kind of dislike computer-generated animation versus hand-drawn animation, but you have to say that regardless of what your idea is about the genre or the medium, you can't take away the significance of that. And Toy Story still holds up. All right, A Bug's Life. This is going to get really hard because I've seen pretty much all of these in theaters, or at least the ones that came out in theaters. So it's going to be really difficult to take my own bias and experience away from this. I remember going to see A Bug's Life in theaters. Specifically remember that film. I went to this cool brand new theater in town to go see it. It was like this huge mega theater. And I was still pretty young, but where do I even put this? I feel like it's pretty insignificant these days. When it first came out, it was mind-blowing. I'm gonna put it, I feel like C is kind of average. I'm gonna put it there. Like, you know, like if you go to school and you get a C, that's like baseline average. So I feel like Bug's Life is there. Toy Story 2. I know a lot of people believe that Toy Story 2 is the best Toy Story. I disagree with that. I think that it adds a lot of things. It adds some new characters. It adds a bit more backstory to Woody. Ultimately, I think this is a good movie. It's not S tier quality, but I want to say it's an A tier film. And also, out of all of the 4 Toy Story films, I think that it actually adds the least to Woody's character. That's, again, I think my personal opinion. The Toy Story 2 is good, but not S tier. Monsters, Inc. is also an A tier film, but I would put it ahead of Toy Story 2. It's not S tier to me, even though when it came out, I believed it would be. It's the kind of film that I enjoy rewatching. It's the type of movie and story that I enjoy riding on like a Disneyland attraction. The Disneyland attraction is extremely fun. But if I was gonna put like, what are the must-see films S tier quality of Pixar, I don't know if I would say that that's one necessarily. I would say that about Finding Nemo. I'm gonna put that at the top. Finding Nemo was a film that I actually came to pretty late. I saw it like maybe a month or so into its run in theaters. There was all of this like critical praise and audience praise for Finding Nemo that when I first saw it as a kid, I didn't really understand it. Or as a teenager, I really didn't get it. Now as an adult, and even though I don't have children of my own, I 100% understand the emotional baggage that goes with this film and why it's so important and deserving of the S tier quality that it is. The animation is gorgeous. I mean, a lot of the animation is gorgeous, but the animation really stepped up between Monsters, Inc. and Finding Nemo. And then you just have this like first couple of minutes of the film. I know a lot of people talk about Up and its first 10 minutes, but the first few minutes of Finding Nemo are heartbreaking. And then to follow the story of this father trying to find his son is amazing. And all the characters are wonderful in it. This one's going to be controversial for sure, 100%. Because a lot of people would say that The Incredibles is their favorite Pixar film. And I disagree with that. I actually don't understand why people think that it's the greatest Pixar film. There are so many more that I would put before that. I actually believe that The Incredibles is a really interesting film, and again, the animation for the time was great. But I would put The Incredibles A tier. It's a perfectly good film. It's fine. I'm going to put it near the back here, behind Toy Story 2 and Monsters, Inc. It's a good film. It's fine. But overall, I think that there are better quality films. Again, if I was going to show somebody only the S tier films and say, this is the best of Pixar, I don't know if I would show them The Incredibles. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Cars, again, this is controversial. I think the first Cars film is actually a good film. But I would put it probably in A tier as well, along with these other ones. I know a lot of people hate Cars and hate that it's a merchandising powerhouse or whatever, but Cars, the first one, it feels like classic cinema. It's just good. It's really good. The soundtrack is actually really good, regardless if you love country music or not. I'm not a fan of country music, but I still enjoy that soundtrack. I enjoy the kind of behind the scenes story about what they're saying, between Route 66 and kind of the dismantling of that as like the road system grew. I really enjoy that movie a lot. Ratatouille is a film. When it first came out, I thought Ratatouille was fine. And then a couple years went by and I thought, Ratatouille is pretty good. And then I kept thinking Ratatouille is great. And every year that goes by, as I sit on Ratatouille, I think it's better and better and better. It's a film that you really have to kind of sit with, in my opinion. And it just continues to get better. I wouldn't say this is S tier, top tier, the thing I would show someone to really make them believe that Pixar is the greatest of all time. I'm going to put it at the top of the A tier. I think it's that good. I think that Ratatouille is the kind of film, no matter who they are, you can sit down with them and enjoy that movie. They are not going to be offended by Ratatouille, but they're also not, with that S tier, they're not going to be shown something that's going to be mind-blowing, but it's going to be a really fun film experience. Ratatouille, A tier, love Ratatouille. WALL-E. WALL-E is a film, when I first saw it, it blew me away. I loved the silent film treatment of the first act, first third of that film. I loved the look and design of the characters and what Earth had looked like at that point. I loved the social aspect of that film. I thought Pixar was doing something incredible and unique and new. And so I would, again, put this in S tier. This, to me, is a film that you could show somebody and say, this is one of the best from Pixar, because this entire film means something. And you can do that with animation. Animation, as a medium, can prove and show and move you to think about the world around you. I think that's what Toy Story does. I think that's what Finding Nemo does. I think that's what WALL-E does. To me, WALL-E is one of the most perfect films they've ever made. And so I'm going to put it there in the S tier. Up, controversial again. I think that the first 10 minutes of Up would put it in the S tier. But the rest of that film is fine. Again, a really good watch, a non-offensive watch no matter who you watch it with. It has a really good story and a really good message behind it, in that, you know, you're never done living your own life, even if the people who you've loved before have passed away, or the people, you know, in generations after you, whatever the case might be, don't stop living your own life. I don't think it has a great villain story. I don't think it needed the villain story, but it's fine, and I'm gonna put it in A tier. Here's the thing. Pixar is gonna have a lot of S and A tier films, at least in its first half here. As we get into this second half, it's gonna change a lot more, but Pixar was on a real good run, probably all the way up to Toy Story 3. And now that we're at the Toy Story 3 mark, after that, I think that you're going to start to see more B, C, D tier stuff. And Toy Story 3 to me is pinnacle Toy Story. There's no better Toy Story film. It does not have the significance, the weight of the original Toy Story as far as changing the world of animation. However, I think out of all the Toy Story films, it's the most emotional. It's the most impactful, especially for a certain generation of like millennial, maybe like younger Gen X kids, older Gen Z kids. I'm gonna put this ahead of Nemo and WALL-E. It's S tier to me. I feel like this is a film that if you showed it to somebody, especially if you showed them Toy Story and then Toy Story 3, like, you don't need Toy Story 2. You can kind of fill in some blanks with like where some of the toys came from. But if you show them Toy Story and Toy Story 3, they're films that go hand in hand, and the emotional weight of that emotional punch at the end of Toy Story 3 still gets me. Like, every time I watch it, I well up. I mean, I'm just thinking about it right now, and I'm legitimately starting to shed some tears. Like, the beginning of Toy Story 3 is my childhood. It is amazing. Cars 2. I mean, it's gonna be F tier, right? Like, it's so unnecessary. It's so... You could clearly watch Cars 2 and think, man, they really wanted to sell some Cars merchandise. There was no reason to make that film, and especially, it's a huge bummer, considering that up until this point, the only sequels that they had made were Toy Story films, and kind of the idea was that the only way to make another Toy Story film is if you had a really great story to tell that would only add to the previous films. And Toy Story 2 does add to Toy Story. Toy Story 3 builds upon that. They build upon each other. Cars 2, I don't feel like really builds upon the lore of Cars in any way. You know, like, Toy Story is about Andy and his relationship with his toys. And it's also really the story about Woody and how he navigates the world. Toy Story 2 adds to that because he gets to see his backstory. Toy Story 3 adds to that because we see Andy go off to college and how Woody deals with that. We see in Toy Story 4, we see how now that Andy's gone off to college and Woody's life has changed, how he sees and views himself now. And Cars 2 just feels like, hey, we came up with an idea. Why don't we make Mater a spy? Why don't we have a spy movie but add in all the Cars characters? It feels cheap. It just kind of feels cheap. Brave is a film I actually enjoyed. I like it. I know a lot of people don't care for it. I know that the Brenda Chapman, and you can go back on the channel and watch the history of Brave. Shannon did a great job with that video a few years back. when she was still a part of the channel. But Brave is a fun film. It's good, but I understand that it's a little clunky because you had one filmmaker making the movie and then she got booted from the position and they brought in a new team of people to make the film. It would have been better if just Brendan Chapman would have seen that film through, I think. It's not a bad film, but I'm gonna put it on the C tier. I think that's fair. I would personally probably, if this was my own bias and no other historical reference or anything else, I might put it in B, but I think C works for it. Monsters University is a movie that also feels a bit insignificant. It's a film that I enjoy. I enjoy the addition to the lore, and I think that adds to it more so than Cars 2 does, but it's still not a film that a lot of people point to and go, that's my favorite. It has a lot of great funny lines. I love Charlie Day as Art in that film. He's probably my new favorite character, but overall, it's not a film that means anything to anybody. And for that, I think it gets the average C tier listing, and I'd put it at the back of that. Unfortunately, I love the original Monsters Inc. I love that film, but Monsters University is fine. We didn't need it. It's fine that it's there. It'd be fine if we didn't have it, you know? Inside Out. Like WALL-E. When I saw WALL-E, I felt like this life-changing moment happened. When I saw Inside Out, to me, it was like, yeah, that's how brains work. It makes me feel like I understand how my own brain works, and I understand how I feel emotions. Pete Docter is amazing, and in fact, Pete Docter, in all of his films that he's directed, has really made some unique and interesting choices, unique and interesting films. The fact that two of his films are either S or A tier already says something, right? But I think Inside Out deserves to be S tier, and I would actually put it. This is a bit of bias here, but I think I'd put it ahead of Finding Nemo and WALL-E. I think that if you were to sit down with somebody and say this is one of the most perfect Pixar films ever made, watch this, they would understand that you could only do this through animation to make it not be overly cheesy, and that it's a film that is cute and lovable and fun. It doesn't have a strong villain. That's not part of it, but it explains emotions so delicately, so wonderfully. You can't not leave after seeing Inside Out and not think about how you yourself feel your own emotions. It's perfect. It's one of the most perfect Pixar films that has ever been made, in my opinion. Followed by The Good Dinosaur, which is, I think, not a bad film. It wasn't a film made with bad intention. It's a clunky film because, like Brave, it went through a bunch of different versions and different directors changed. Because of that clunkiness, it feels like it deserves to be a D tier film. It's the first D tier film here. It might be the only D tier film. I just feel like it's not amazing. I don't mind watching it. Actually, going back and watching it not too long ago, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the watch, but it's, of all of the Pixar films, it's below average. It's not what you want from a good Pixar film. Even watching Monsters University, Brave, A Bug's Life, they're average. You walk away, you go, that was a fine film. Like The Good Dinosaur, you see it and you go, this could have been better. This could have been better. And yeah, I wouldn't want to show that to somebody. Like if they'd never seen a Pixar movie, The Good Dinosaur is not the movie I would show them at all. Finding Dory is a film that is good. I would say that it adds a bit to the lore. Of course, with Dory and her parents and her background. I'm going to put it in the B tier. I think that it's better than average. I think it has a lot to say about disabilities, which is good. The social ideas there. It's a film that shows incredible animation. Some of the moments in that film pull at my heartstrings. I can think about them. I can visually see them. Brilliant moments, emotional moments. I think it deserves more credit than it usually gets as far as sequels go. Cars 3 is actually a decent film. It has a good message, a cool message, but it is also a film that I see and I go, we didn't really need this. And I think that comes from the tainting of the Cars franchise that was Cars 2. Because of that, I don't think a lot of people even saw Cars 3. They're like, you're not going to trick me again. Especially like Planes came out and like they just ruined the franchise. And because of that, I think it has to end up on the C tier, possibly towards the D tier. I think that it's a film that, yeah, a lot of people, you know, and they're not wrong. They're not wrong about that. Coco is a A-tier film to me. When I saw this film, here's my bias. I saw this film with a bunch of artists and animators on the Disney Studio lot. And I got to see all the creators that made this film, and it was really cool to see them and talk to them and hear from them after this film was done. They screened the film, and then they had kind of a Q&A afterwards. And we all cried. Even the moderator of the Q&A actually had to pause the Q&A and delay it for like 5 minutes because he could not stop crying. Coming from, I understand that a lot of people have no idea about Mexican culture. I come from very luckily come from a state from Colorado and then moving to California. It has a lot of Mexican culture in it. And I knew about Dia de los Muertos beforehand, but the idea to spread that culture, the ideas around the holiday, the Day of the Dead holiday, what it means significantly instead of, I know a lot of people want to compare it to Halloween, and now I don't think people do because of this film. And of course, a lot of people probably have had somebody in their lives pass away, die, and it feels like there's a connection to this film because of that. And so because of that, I think it's an A-tier film. I think that it's better than some of these A-tier films. In fact, I might put it right behind The Incredibles. Again, it's not a film. If you've never seen a Pixar movie, it's not the first film I would show somebody. All of these S-tier films are films I would show somebody their first time ever seeing a Pixar film. Even if they'd never seen, by the way, I'm saying this because if they've never seen any Pixar film, I would show them Toy Story. If they've never seen any Pixar film, I would show them Toy Story 3. And I would show them Toy Story 3 first. Like, I would show them without any other context. I think you can watch Toy Story 3 and completely understand everything that's going on there. I would show them Inside Out and Finding Nemo and WALL-E. And I think that they would get a lot out of those films. Any of the 5 at the top. Incredibles 2 is another good sequel film. It adds to the lore. The animation is amazing. I think that the animation, if you compare side to side, The Incredibles versus The Incredibles 2, the animation blows the first one out of the water. It isn't a film that you really need necessarily, but I highly enjoy Incredibles 2 to the point in which I would put it at the B tier behind Finding Dory. I think that it's that fun and enjoyable. Again, it's not a film that I would say, oh, if you've never seen a Pixar film, you need to see this one. But I do think that it's really fun and enjoyable. Toy Story 4 is a movie that when I first saw it, I didn't want to like it. Toy Story 1 through 3 is a perfect trilogy. I did not want to like Toy Story 4. But as I sat with it, I enjoyed it more and more. I enjoy it now, especially now, as a full-fledged adult, and kind of thinking about my own path in life and where I stand. As you know, the people in my life have kind of left me. My parents moved away. My grandparents, all except for one, passed away. And where does that leave me? Who am I? There's a lot of great questions that Toy Story 4 asks. Plus, it includes some of the greatest characters that have been added to the Toy Story 4 legacy. Forky's amazing. He's just fun. This is not, to me, an S-tier quality film, nor is it an A-tier film. I think that you have to have the previous knowledge of Toy Story 1, 2, and 3 to watch 4. I think that's its biggest downfall. Because of that, I think that's the same. You could say the same for Incredibles 2 and the same for Finding Dory. Because of that, I think it ends up on the B tier, near the back. It's a really enjoyable film. It was not needed for the lore. It expands upon the lore, but it was not needed. But it's a good watch. And I think that maybe over time, like Ratatouille, it might be something that goes up my own personal list, just based on life experience. All right, now we're getting into the pandemic era films. This one's tricky. Onward is really tricky because I know so many people that have connected with Onward because of their relationship with their siblings. And I'm an only child. And even though I've had friends that have felt like brothers and sisters to me, I didn't connect to this film like I should have, or like other people have because of their siblings. And I have a pretty good relationship with my father. He was not somebody who was like out of my life ever. He wasn't gone by the time I was like 3 or 4 years old. I have long-lasting memories with my father. I have long-lasting memories with my mom. I love Dungeons and Dragons. I love playing it with my friends. I still didn't connect to this movie like I wanted it to. And maybe that's for other people different. This film historically is going to be significant because it was only in theaters for 2 weeks or so before being pulled because of the pandemic. But I don't think that matters to the filmmaking industry as a whole. Because of that, I think that this is also a B tier, possibly a C tier film. I'm going to put it at the back of B. I think that it's fine. It's a good watch. Maybe I need to rewatch it again. I don't take anything away from this film besides just having a good time. And I feel bad for that. I genuinely feel bad that I didn't emotionally connect with Onward. Onward might be the first Pixar movie that didn't make me emotionally connected to any of the characters like I thought I wanted to. And that's just personally disappointing. It's not disappointing in the sense of like The Good Dinosaur being disappointing, just my own personal disappointment. Soul is a film, though, that I deeply connected with. I sat there with my parents, and actually, because it came out on Christmas Day, so we all watched it together. We all cried, and deeply connected with Soul. I think that it has really empowering messages, and I would put this... I want to say this is close to S tier, but I don't think it's an S tier film. I wouldn't show this to someone who's never seen a Pixar film before. I think it's fantastic, and I want to say it's an A tier film, but it's close to being an S tier film. That's hard. It might be at the top of the A tier list for me. It's so good. It's another Pete Docter film. Pete Docter having great. I mean, nothing is below an A tier for Pete Docter at this point, and that's saying something. I think he's a fantastic storyteller, a fantastic thinker, and I hope that people revisit Soul. It's a shame too, like Soul's biggest problem is that it never made it to theaters. Because it didn't go into theaters, it feels a little less significant. The straight-to-video concept is great in theory, but it also doesn't give a lot of leverage and historical value to film. And that's gonna hurt it a bit. Luca's kind of the same way. I feel like Luca's a film that was really great. I enjoyed it when it came out. I watched it multiple times. And then it's kind of gone to the back of my memory just because I didn't have that major experience of going to the theater and seeing it. So I want to say that it's an A-tier film, but it might be near the back of the A-tier list here, just because it could possibly be a B-tier film. Again, a really pretty film, a really fun film. Of course, a lot of people have the gay undertones to that movie, and I totally see it, and I understand why. But because it wasn't like WALL-E or Inside Out that have this very forward-thinking, this is a social idea, this is what this means, it feels a little less insignificant. And the director coming out and saying like he didn't think it was a gay story, all that stuff. And I feel like people have actually kind of forgotten a bit about Luca. People don't really talk about it nearly as much, at least publicly. Turning Red, the latest one, and it's been a couple of weeks since I saw this film, and I wanted to wait to make the tier list because I wanted to not have the recency bias of this movie. But I still really, really love this movie, and it's so good, but I don't think it's the S-tier film that I thought it was when it first came out. I feel like it's an A-tier film. To me, it's above Luca. I think it's actually above some of the other ones. I'm gonna put it above Cars and Up, behind Coco. I understand its significance and representation. The same with Coco here. And I think that it's got some great music. It's cool that it goes back to the early 2000s, because that's when my childhood was, so it feels nostalgic to me personally. It feels like it hits a lot of buttons for me as a film viewer. But it's still not a film that I would say, if you've never seen a Pixar film, this is the one to watch. These 5 films at the top feel like these are the ones I would send somebody off to go watch first and foremost. And Lightyear, I don't know. I don't know where it's going. I'm going to take a strong guess just because it's a spin-off to 4 other films, and it's going to be good. Chris Evans is going to do a fantastic job with the voice. I think that's going to have some really funny moments. I'm super stoked for that kind of retro space age. Ultimately, I think that it's going to be a movie that is going to get forgotten in a couple of years. Because of that, I'm just going to put it at the B tier. Again, it hasn't come out yet as of recording this, so I don't know. And I'm going to put it, I don't know, above Onward. I think that it'll be remembered more than Onward, especially since it's going to be in theaters, the first theater film since those first 2 weeks of Onward coming out. But that is it. That's my tier list. Let me know, again, what you think. This is me coming at this from a critical and film reviewer kind of look at this, but also has some of my own personal bias in there, and I know that people are going to have their own personal bias and their own thoughts historically, what was significant, what was not. Do you think that my top 5 are correct? Do you think that Cars 3 deserves better, or The Good Dinosaur deserves better? Let me know. Leave your comments. I'd love to hear from you. And let me know what I should be ranking on a tier list next time. But thank you for watching, and as always, my friends, keep moving forward.